Hello boys and girls, it's Nick with the Hostile Homestead, and as many of you may have noticed, I like fire. I am the pyrotechnician of the poop-powered flamethrower, and I didn't wake up one day and say, gee, you know what, I wonder if I can make a flamethrower that runs on rabbit poop. No, I was actually playing around with something, an apparatus similar to this. Woo! Oh, I get to smell the burnt hairs. We got us a campfire. So many people that have been following the page and following the blog and stuff know that I'm kind of a pyro. Back when I was younger, I was actually making gunpowder, and one of the components to gunpowder is carbon. You have to make your own charcoal to get a good solid carbon base for gunpowder. I won't go into the details other than you pack one of these bad boys full of straw, poke a little hole in the top of it, like so, and you put it in a fire. We're gonna let this burn down a little bit because it's already showed its aggressiveness to me. I'm missing some hairs on my arm there. Got a little close. Anyway, so the idea is you put a biomass inside of the can. You heat it up with an external heat source, like the fire, and it causes pyrolysis, or a thermal breakdown of the matter inside the can. Well, young me, I'm looking at this, and what happens is all of the hydrocarbons, the volatile hydrocarbons, start coming out of this little hole here, and they light on fire, kind of like a candle. Well, I was looking at that thinking, you know what? That's fuel. There's got to be a way that I can harness that, maybe even distill it down to a liquid and run a vehicle on it. So, doing what every good redneck does when they want to distill something, I went and got some copper line and stuck it in the hole, flared it, and was trying to condense the gases coming out of the can. And it didn't really work the way that I wanted it to, because I could never get a liquid to condense out of the copper tubing. Even though I ran it through cold water, I did all of this different stuff, it never worked the way I wanted to. So I concluded that it was a gaseous fuel. I spent years on this. Then I took it to a professor at NAU. He's like, oh yeah, it looks like a external heat source gasification. It's like, no, it doesn't have a name yet. Wait, what? Somebody back in the 1880s had already figured this out, and they were running vehicles on wood chips, coal, and cow manure. So gasification is what we were doing. I just didn't know what it was called. So anyway, later on in life, I decided to look at gasification a little bit more. And when I did, I realized that I'd have to buy a pelletizer to give me a solid shape to the fuel source, because I wanted a pellet. I wanted something I could depend on. A solid shape, density, and moisture content. But my end goal was to produce electricity. And it seems kind of silly to have an electric pelletizer producing the fuel for a gasification device that's going to produce electricity. So I turned to nature. Well, what in nature creates pellets? There's elk, there's deer, goats. All of those things are too big and too loud for the HOA where I lived in, that was controlled by the Third Reich and Hitler's little brother. So I went to rabbits. I got 5 rabbits. Those first 5 rabbits were supposed to be all females. Well, one of them had a sex change in the middle of the night, and I ended up with 50 rabbits later on. So I made a business out of the rabbit thing. But anyway, while I was still experimenting with gasification, I did the same experiment with the straw, but instead of straw, I used these. Dried rabbit manure. Ah, yes. Now, if any of you have seen my episode on Doomsday Preppers, you saw that I put this stuff in a blender and shot it through a pipe, lit it on fire, and made a flamethrower that runs on rabbit poop. That's not what we're doing today. As fun as all that was, it's kind of an inefficient use of fuel. But flamethrowers are really cool, I know. So, what we're going to do is we're going to pound this lid on and put it in the coals over here. Now that the fire is a little less violent than it was about 10 minutes ago. So I had to go and buy this paint can because when you buy paint anymore, they've got a plastic bottom, which is totally jacked up. This was $6 for a stupid paint can. You used to get them for free when you bought paint. Anyway, so we are going to, could you grab me one of those shovels, please? Maybe the flat one? That's perfect. Thank you, sir. This ain't no Dutch oven cookout here, son. Set it right in the middle. We're gonna get the coals right up close to it. Now, if I were doing this to have a long-term energy source, I wouldn't use the cheap tin of a bucket like this or a paint pail like this. I would use probably some hydraulic steel, like an 8-inch chamber, port it and do all kinds of fun stuff like that. But we're just proving a proof of concept here. So if you could zoom in, this is how it starts out. And we're going to come back to it a little bit once the smoke starts coming out of that stack. So the way it's going to start is there'll start being fumes. Woo, she's warm. There'll start being some fumes coming out of the hole, and it'll be kind of a dirty smoke. And then after a while, we'll light that on fire, and it'll just sit there like a candle and burn. But that's going to be in about 5-10 minutes or so. And this is actually how you make carbon. You can do this with any wood source. You can do this with straw, hay, any of that stuff. The drier, the better. You got to dehydrate it with the heat. But as soon as that candle starts going, that little fire starts going down to almost nothing, that's when you pull it out of the heat source and you've got a good charcoal. You can cook on that. I mean, if it's not rabbit manure, I wouldn't cook on rabbit manure. Actually, I mean, if you're in a situation where you need to cook something, all you got is rabbit manure, have at it. But yeah, let's come back to this in a second. All right, you can start to see a little bit of the vapors coming out of the hole. It's kind of hard to see because the fire around it, but as soon as this fire dies down, we'll be able to see a little better. It's probably on fire at the moment. We just can't tell if it's that or if it's, whew, the bamboo. My goodness. I gotta plant a stand of bamboo. This stuff burns hot. Impressive. I have to remember to do this a little bit further away from the house. Gosh, that's pretty. All right, do you hear that hissing? All right, look at how. See that? See the hissing coming out of the middle there? Or see the hissing? Oh my gosh! All right, that flamethrower that's coming out of it. That, my friends, is fuel. It's even causing a vortex when it hits. That there is rabbit manure fuel. And it smells as good as it sounds, let me tell you. I'm really glad to be standing in the smoke of it right now. Oh. Well, actually, it smells about like burning, what, wet grass? Wet grass or bunny ass, you'd never tell the difference. All right, let's see if I can light that on. This is all fuel, so we really don't want to. All right, you can tell this is the torch. This is the fuel coming out. That's just from heating up all of the biomass inside of that can. That's some exciting stuff. Let's try and get a fire going on top. Oh, really warm. We're gonna tape it on top. Here you can see. So again, what's happening is pyrolysis, or the thermal breakdown of matter. The heat from the surrounding fire heats up the biomass on the inside, releasing all of the volatile hydrocarbons that are then basically leaving behind a carbon skeleton of what they once were. So in gasification, you've got, I should probably not stand in the smoke. Oh. It is 420. We're smoking stuff. It's not as fun as what you other fellers are. Anyway, in gasification, there's 4 things that are happening. Same thing as when you strike a match. When you strike a match, there's dehydration, there's pyrolysis, thermal breakdown of matter, combustion, and reduction. Dehydration, you know what that is. The water heats up and comes out of whatever biomass you're using. And then pyrolysis, you're releasing all of the hydrocarbons. When you light that match, the fire is above the match. It's not really on the match. It's burning all those gases that you've released. And then once that combustion happens, you know, your fire is basically turning hydrocarbons and oxygen into carbon dioxide and water. And reduction is that carbon skeleton that you're left with, a match that's now black all the way through. You're left with just that carbon skeleton. In a gasifier, what you're trying to do is harvest all 4 of those things. So you have combustion in the center of the gasifier with just a little bit of ambient oxygen coming in, causes a little bit of combustion. The heat from that combustion causes pyrolysis in the biomass above the combustion, and a little bit of dehydration above that in the gasifier. Now you have a vacuum on it, a draw. We can move this way, you're probably dying. My poor cameraman is in the smoke. Oh, the sacrifices I make you make. Anyway, all right, so this is calming down a little bit. Get a shot of that. Nice white smoke there. See if we can get it to maintain fire. And then I'll get back to my description. Not quite. Anyway, so the dehydration, pyrolysis, and the combustion, you have an engine or some other sort of a vacuum pulling draw on your gasifier. Like an engine, you know, pumping up and down is actually going to draw the air into the gasifier and the fuel out of the gasifier. Now, we talked about reduction. Reduction is when carbon is 800 to 1200 degrees, it gets greedy and starts snatching oxygen off of the molecules going through it. So underneath of the combustion area, you've got this hot carbon, and it's turning water, or H2O, into H2, and it's turning carbon dioxide into carbon monoxide. both of those things are fuels. And then the volatile hydrocarbons that go through there, they don't have any oxygen, so they're not going to react. They're just going to go through like a rich smoke like you have here. So at the end of the gasification system, you have a very hot, almost 1200 degrees at exit, fuel. It's just really excited, and there's a lot of fly ash and stuff in there. So you need to run it through a filter and a cooling system, some way to condense it. It doesn't condense into a liquid, but the cooler you can get those fumes, the more you can get into the engine at one time. So, all right, we're cooled down enough. Let's try this again. We'll try and light it. Still, I might have made the hole a little bit too big. Good night, that's warm. Hot damn. So now that the fire's kind of calming down, there's still a lot of fuel in there. We probably should have done a little less for this video, but you know, I plan on using this carbon for multiple reasons. So the video was actually kind of a secondary thought, so you're welcome. But yeah, this is something that if you're in a situation where you don't have firewood, but you've got, you know, buffalo chips, or you've got cow patties, or you've got a big old pile of grass. You know, if you've got a bunch of grass, you can shove it into a PVC pipe and ramrod it down real tight, and then you can actually make giant pellets, kind of like a log, and they'll burn about like that too. The more dense you can get it, the better. Paper. Another good one is if you can get tons of paper, you put it in like a 5-gallon bucket and you soak it for a couple of days, and you get it almost kind of nasty. It'll start smelling bad. You stir that up real good and you stuff it into a PVC pipe with a bunch of holes in it so all the water comes out. You're left with that pulp, and it just keeps compacting in there. And then break it out of that PVC. You can make fire logs out of that stuff, especially if you've got like a wax supply. But I digress. We're talking about rabbit shit. Now, another tactic that you can use is, instead of having it set up like this, we did it because it's cooler to look at. I'm going to go ahead and find the handle, pick this guy up, and turn it on its side, shake up some of the contents here. Okay, it's a little harder to see, but now what we can do is we can throw some more wood on the fire. And we'll do it just on the sides of the can so we can try and see. Really don't need this much wood in there, but you know what? We're going for it. Who said overkill's overrated? I say it's underrated. Get this stuff to light again. Oh yes, that's why I have a torch. Okay. From this side, you can kind of see that all the smoke that's coming out of our old friend, that blowhole of... Oh, we're gonna laugh at all the things I'm not saying right now. Sorry, kids. Anyway, as this heats up, we should see an increase in the smoke coming out of that hole. Or it could just light on fire. Or we might be close to having all of our... Yeah, there it goes again. A little bit of smoke coming out. it's shy. The second I talk about it, it goes away. Just like me, I'm very shy. All right, there she's going again. In a second, it should catch on fire and start contributing to the heat. Now, in theory, you could put this thing upside down, and the heat of the fuel escaping and burning will actually contribute to the pyrolysis of the fuel left inside of the can. There it goes. You hear it start blazing. See, it's making a kind of a vortex in the middle there. There's no wind right now. All of that gushing sound is actually the fuel escaping that can. Yeah, I definitely should have used less for this video. Reality is we're probably going to collapse the can before we actually see the insides of it. That'll be sad, but I'll be able to dig through the ashes and show you what I did. Oh, my goodness. It ain't balmy out here. Oh, come over here. Look in this way. Kind of hard to see. There you go. Thing sounds like a small jet engine taking off. Burn barrel. It's an impressive amount of fuel. It's literally nothing but dried rabbit manure being heated up by a bunch of junk wood that I had laying around. How is it that we're still pulling dinosaur blood out of the ground, running our cars on that, when we could literally run vehicles on rabbit poop? Come on, guys. Alright, shut her down. Alright, so we went ahead and popped the lid off this bad boy. And it smells like 420 is happening large and in charge over here at the Hostile Homestead. Yeah. Alright, puff puff pass. We'll Let's go ahead and see what we created here. All right, nice charcoal bunny turds. Delicious. Set this over here. Now, you can see that there's some bits in here that still maintain their color, and the rest of it it's nice and charred black. I'm gonna try something. I don't know. I'm gonna try a little theory here. We're gonna light it on fire, see what happens. Oh, look at that. So it's literally charcoal. This is a fuel source, as we've been describing in this whole freaking video. But these guys, just like this, will burn. Now, the idea is, in a gasifier, you would use this as a fuel source. All of the hydrocarbons coming out of it, and instead of having big chunks of noticeably round rabbit poop, you would actually use up all of that carbon. That's the other thing. Gasification, it's old technology, 1880s. It's 1880s tech. And what's cool is today, if you had an internal combustion engine hooked up to a gasification device, it's drawing the fuel out of the gasifier, and it goes through its filter, it goes through its condenser, and it goes into the engine. But you're going to have a lot more hot carbon out of this system than what you really need. So if you've got all this hot carbon, you might as well use it. So when you have a good burning engine, a good efficient engine, all of the fuel being used gets turned into carbon dioxide and water. Well, we already talked about what the reduction layer does to carbon dioxide and water. So in theory, you should be able to route the exhaust of the engine back into the reduction layer of the gasifier and use that as fuel production. So that little bit of water vapor and CO2 coming out of the exhaust pipe of the engine is now adding to the fuel. So you've essentially made a carbon neutral system. But the only time there's anything leaving the system is if you drain off a little excess water to relieve pressure. I see this as a win. Who doesn't need a little clean water, right? Clean water brought to you from a gasifier filled full of rabbit poop. Yeah, go ahead and take notes on that, kids. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, I'm Nick with the Hostile Homestead. Make sure you check out the page, hostilehare.com, and from there you'll be able to find all of our other shenanigans. Thanks again.